Good evening. Welcome to South Asia Newsline. I'm Yeshchandra. Here are the top stories we are tracking for you on Tuesday, the 28th of June. Flood situation remains grim in Silchar in India's Assam. Landslide kills 3 in Sikkim. Activists in UK and Germany highlight Pakistani atrocities in Balochistan. And protest erupts in Nepal against China encroaching no man's land along border. And now for all the details. The flood situation in worst affected Silchar town in India's northeastern Assam state has continued to remain grim, as several areas have remained inundated. Meanwhile, 3 persons were killed in a landslide incident in Sikkim state following heavy rains that have hit most of the country's northeastern region for the past 3 weeks.
Flood situation in India's northeastern Assam state, particularly Nagaon district and the worst hit Silchar town, continued to remain grim on Tuesday. In Assam and neighbouring Bangladesh, more than 150 people have died and millions have been displaced by the catastrophic floods in recent weeks. The staff at the waterlogged Kachar Cancer Hospital and Research Centre in Silchar has continued to provide life-saving treatment to patients who are arriving on makeshift boats. Since the entrance to the hospital is inundated, the health workers have shifted the outpatient department on dry roads under a tree, while the much-needed chemotherapy is being given in wards where there are currently 85 patients, an official said.
कैंसर है ना तो अस्पताल है, एक दिन भी हॉस्पिटल बंद नहीं हो सकता है, इलाज नहीं रुक सकता, कुछ भी हो जाए तो बाढ़ हो या कोविड हो, इलाज तो चलना है। सो हम ओपीडी बाहर कर रहे थे और जो बाहर ही सॉर्ट आउट कर सकते थे वो वहीं पे सॉर्ट आउट किया है।
Meanwhile, a woman and her 2 children aged 10 years and 7 months were killed in a landslide triggered by heavy rains in neighbouring Sikkim state in the early hours of Tuesday. In the last 3 months, monsoon rains have unleashed disastrous flooding and a series of landslides across India's northeast region.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Tuesday arrived on a day-long visit to the United Arab Emirates after attending the G7 summit in Germany, where he held meetings with world leaders as well as interacted with the Indian diaspora. In a special gesture, UAE President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan and members of the royal family warmly received PM Modi at the airport in capital Abu Dhabi. Both the leaders later held a meeting aimed at bolstering bilateral ties. During his visit, PM Modi offered his condolences on the passing away of Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan, the former president of the Gulf nation, who died at the age of 73 after a long illness on May 13. Earlier, India's Foreign Secretary Vinay Quatra in a press conference on Monday said India is looked upon as a solution provider by all, which was quite evident by the body language and camaraderie of leaders with PM Modi. Providing details of the sessions at G7 summit, Quatra noted in the first session, PM Modi spoke on climate, energy and health, while in the second session, PM addressed issues of food security and gender equality, emphasizing India's women-led development approach. PM Modi also made India's position clear on the Ukraine conflict, where he reiterated that there must be an immediate end to the hostilities and a resolution should be reached by choosing the path of dialogue and diplomacy. Baloch activists staged demonstrations in the United Kingdom and Germany to highlight Pakistani atrocities in Balochistan. They demanded the immediate withdrawal of the occupying forces from the region while urging the international community to intervene.
Activists of the Free Balochistan movement held anti-Pakistan protests in the United Kingdom and Germany over the weekend to mark the International Day in support of victims of torture and highlight rights violations in Balochistan. The protesters blame the Pakistani army, which operates with impunity in Balochistan, has been committing genocide of innocent Baloch people, highlighting several cases of extrajudicial killings, enforced disappearances and rape in the region. They demanded the immediate withdrawal of the occupying forces of both Pakistan and bordering Iran while urging the international community to intervene.
They've been carrying on with military operations and genocide, ethnic cleansing, massacre, enforced disappearances. Every type of human rights violations are taking place in both Iran and Pakistan.
Activists have long accused Baloch people have been targets of so-called military operations, ethnic stereotyping and abductions by the Pakistan security forces. They blame thousands have been internally displaced because of armed conflicts and army operations over the years.
Moving on, traders and government employees in Pakistan-administered Kashmir held a protest in Muzaffarabad city recently against rising inflation and IMF-dictated budget announced by the Pakistan government. They also voiced anger over the recent cut in subsidies and development budget allotted for the illegally occupied region.
Traders and government employees in Pakistan-administered Kashmir recently staged a demonstration in Muzaffarabad city against soaring inflation and International Monetary Fund IMF-dictated budget announced by the Pakistan government. The protesting employees demanded a raise in their salaries at par with other government workers in parts of Pakistan. They raised concern that a record hike in fuel prices and other essential items has made survival difficult for them. They blamed the government is not at all bothered about their problems and also voiced anger over a cut in subsidies and development budget for the illegally occupied region.
और हमारा ये मुतालबा है कि मुलाजमीन की जो तनख्वाहें उनमें 100% इजाफा किया जाए, जो सेहत और तालीम का जो बजट है, जो बुनियादी ज़रूरत है, उसमें 100% इजाफा किया जाए और जो पेट्रोल की और अशिया खुर्दनोश की जो कीमतें उनमें फिर और कमी की जाए ताकि मेहनतकश तबके को जो जीने का जो हक है वो दिया जा सके.
Locals in the illegally occupied region have long blamed that successive governments have only exploited them over the years through economic depredations instead of providing any sort of relief.
In news from Afghanistan, Afghanistan has already been in the grip of a severe humanitarian and economic crisis, and the devastating earthquake has made matters worse. Though Taliban authorities and the United Nations and other Afghan and international agencies are coordinating efforts in response to last week's deadly earthquake, survivors in villages said their lives have been destroyed and some were still waiting to receive assistance.
Survivors in villages rocked by an earthquake in eastern Afghanistan said their lives have been destroyed and were waiting for aid which has yet to come their way. Families in Paktika province huddled in tents as aftershocks shook the area as they tried to salvage belongings, rebuild homes out of rubble, eating what food they could find. Paktika and coast provinces sustained extensive damages in the quake. At least 1,000 people were killed, 2,000 injured, and 10,000 homes destroyed in the 6.1 magnitude earthquake last Wednesday. After which, the UN Humanitarian Office warned that cholera outbreaks in the aftermath are of particular and serious concern. Helping thousands of Afghans is also a challenge for countries that had imposed sanctions on Afghanistan. The United Nations and several other countries have rushed aid to the affected areas, with more due to arrive over the coming days. Taliban authorities, the UN and other Afghan and international agencies are coordinating efforts in response to last week's deadly earthquake.
Moving on to news from Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka's Power and Energy Minister Kanchana Wijesekara has said the island nation will allow companies from oil-producing nations to import and sell fuel in the country as it tries to overcome a massive shortage of petrol and diesel.
Sri Lanka will allow companies from oil-producing countries to import and sell fuel, the Power and Energy Minister Kanchana Wijesekara said on Tuesday, ending a duopoly as it tries to overcome a shortage of petrol and diesel that is exacerbating an economic crisis. The cabinet decision came as Wijesekara headed to Qatar, and a ministerial colleague was due to arrive in Russia on Sunday for talks on energy deals. Cabinet approval was granted to open up the fuel import and retail sales market to companies from oil-producing nations, Wijesekara said on Twitter. Sri Lanka is suffering its worst economic crisis since its independence, with foreign exchange reserves at a record low of $1.9 billion, according to the central bank, though analysts estimate a lower level of usable funds. The island of 22 million people is struggling to pay for essential imports of food, medicine and most critically fuel. The government closed urban schools for about 2 weeks from Tuesday and allowed fuel supplies only to services deemed essential like health, trains and buses, as stocks would only last a week or so based on regular demand.
බලවත් අසාධාරණයක්. ඒ කියන්නේ මේ ඉන්ධන අත්‍යවශ්‍ය සේවයක් විදිහට මිනිස්සුන්ට අත්‍යවශ්‍යයෙන්ම මේක පරිභෝජනය කරන්න අවශ්‍ය වෙනවා. මොකද ඉන්ධන නැත්තම් මේ රටේ සම්පූර්ණම ක්‍රියාකාරීත්වය අක්‍රිය වෙනවා. ඇත්තටම මේ මිනිස්සු ලොකු බලාපොරොත්තු තියාගෙන මේ රජය බලයටපත් කළා. ඇත්තටම මේ රජයේ පාලකයන්ගේ අදූරදර්ශී ක්‍රියාකලාපේ නිසා අද මේ ඉන්ධන මේ විදිහට මිනිස්සු පෝලිං වල දවස් ගණන් දුක් විඳිනවා. ඒ මිනිස්සු අසරණ වෙලා ඒ මිනිස්සුගේ දූ දරුවන්ට ජීවනෝපාය කරගන්න විදියක් නැහැ. මේක මහා බලවත් අපරාධයක් විදිහට මම දකින්නේ.
The state-run Ceylon Petrol Corporation controls about 80% of the fuel market and Lanka IOC, a unit of Indian Oil Corporation, the rest. The cabinet also allowed bunkering companies registered with the government to import jet fuel so that flights are not disrupted, the government said in a statement.
In news from Nepal, a civic group in Nepal held an anti-China protest blaming it of expanding the wire fence within the no man's land and encroaching into Nepali territory in northern Gorkha district. The protester demanded China to immediately recede.
A civic group in Nepal staged a protest on Monday outside the parliament building in Kathmandu against China for unilaterally expanding the wire fence within the no man's land that lies along the shared border between the two countries. The protesters affiliated to the Rashtriya Ekta Abhiyan accused China has fenced and installed wires in the no man's land near the northern Gorkha district, which violates a mutual agreement regarding such structures with Nepal. They sloganeered asking China to recede.
चाइना ने बारंबार हमारे देश के भूभाग को कैप्चर करते आ रहा है, अधिग्रहण करते आ रहा है, कानूनी दायरा को पार करते हुए। दो देश के बीच में जो समझौता है, उस समझौता के विरुद्ध में चाइना आकर के एक तो हुमला में 12 ठो बिल्डिंग हमारे भूभाग में बना लिया, दूसरा रुई गांव को, सिंधु पालचौक में रुई गांव को चाइना ने कैप्चर कर लिया.
With the Chinese illegal occupation of erecting fence, movement of locals near the border has come to a halt, reports suggested. Bilateral ties between Nepal and China have strengthened in recent years, with China becoming a major donor of aid and trading partner of its tiny neighbor, besides bringing major investments in infrastructure development.
Bangladesh's longest railroad bridge, the Padma Bridge, has opened for traffic. Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina inaugurated the landmark engineering marvel this past weekend over the turbulent Padma River after years of delay due to allegations of corruption. The bridge will connect capital Dhaka to the underdeveloped southwestern region of the country and reduce travel time not only for people in 21 districts across the river, but also open up vistas of seamless connectivity from India to Southeast Asia. The double-layer steel truss bridge incorporates a 4-lane highway on an upper level, along with single-track railway on the lower level. With a construction cost of $3.6 billion, it is one of the largest mega projects Bangladesh has ever undertaken. Sheikh Hasina said it is not a pile of brick or cement, but a symbol of Bangladesh's pride, capacity and dignity. Well, that's all we have for you from South Asia this evening. Now our viewers can watch the show on SouthAsiaNewsline.com. You can also visit us on Facebook.com/AsiaNewsline and follow us on Twitter @AsiaNewsline. That's all in tonight's edition. We will see you same time tomorrow. Good night.